Thank you everyone for joining us today on the webinar mentioning that how the lack of talent is affecting project delivery in the tech sector at the moment. Really and truly, it's a simple fact that the most significant delays to project delivery is the lack of tech talent. Projects have been delayed massively over the past 12 months because of a lack of appropriate skills. And in fact, there's recent stats show that at least half of the world's tech leaders are struggling to deliver projects because of the lack of talent that they have. It's a very timely conversation that we're going to be having today. We've been joined very kindly by 4 absolute legends from the Austin tech market: Alex Lyle, Rich Robinson, William Baxter, and Chris Holland. I'd love to be able to do an introduction that could do them justice, but I probably can't. So I'll let them introduce themselves. So William, would you like to start?
Sure. Thanks, everybody. My name is William Baxter. I'm CTO and co-founder here at Vertalo. We connect and enable the digital asset ecosystem. We deal with the private assets, private securities markets, and we're trying to build a bridge from the current largely analog systems to the future digital space. And we've been here in Austin operating for about 5 years. We have a team in office, in fact, since June of 2020. Of course, we're hiring like mad.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Chris, would you like to do an intro?
I'm Chris Holland. I'm here in Austin as well. I work at a company leading a couple of cross-functional engineering teams of software engineers and quality automators, as well as manual QA folks. I've been in tech since the mid-90s, just kind of writing software since the mid-90s, and I've served teams of different sizes since then.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. Alex.
Yeah. Hi. So my name's Alex Lyle. I'm the CTO at Critwire. Critwire has been around for about 10 years now. I've been the CTO here for nearly 3. And we help companies understand and mitigate their security risks on Android and iOS devices. And I have been in the cybersecurity market building and making security products for about 15 years now. And I've been in Austin for 8 or 9 years now. So a fair while.
Thank you very much, Alex. And yeah, last but by no means least, Rich.
Hi, I'm Rich Robinson. I'm with Standard Industries, which is a privately held global industrial company. So in terms of size, we're in over 80 countries, have over 20,000 employees. In terms of length, I think we win the trophy here through our operating companies. We trace our beginnings back well over 100 years. In some of our larger operating companies are focused in the built world, in the material space, whether that's through roofing or chemical catalysts. But we also have holdings and invest in an array of companies from a technology base, everything from startups all the way through public companies. And so as CTO, I have the variety of whether it's a large SAP rollout on a global scale or working to build software with our startups. You know, we face this challenge of project delivery on every scale imaginable.
Thank you very much, Rich. Really appreciate that. Without further ado, we'll get into it. I mean, one of the biggest things that the whole discussion is about is around project delivery and obviously how maybe the lack of talent is affecting that. And everyone's hiring like mad and everyone's trying to deliver like mad. So, Alex, I'll start with you. What approach are you taking to avoid, whilst trying to grow the team, to avoid the effects of project delivery?
It's a difficult one for us because, you know, we are a software company. So we sell using technology to enable us or enhance us to sell something. We sell what we make. And on top of that, what we make is our IP, you know, so it's core to the company. The company's valued off the products that we make. And so while outsourcing is always something that you're sort of tempted by, the idea of outsourcing, you know, something that's core IP is not one that you might want to really push for. So, you know, you try hiring like mad and you start looking at things that aren't in the core of our IP that we can start offloading on a temporary basis. You know, you have to be realistic. You know, the market, well, I think the market's going to change, you know, in the next couple of months, but the market right now is incredibly competitive and you have to be realistic about those. So like headcount, and you have to be realistic in your time frame as well, that, you know, we will slip if we don't hire these people. And while the idea of outsourcing helps, if your time frames within 6 to 8 months, outsourcing a group and getting them up to speed, especially on some of the products that we produce, which are quite complicated, that's a 6-month cycle anyway. So it's really been about managing expectations and managing timelines to make sure that we take into account that, we will not have the depth of technical talent that we might have had 2-3 years ago to pick from. So, unfortunately.
Yeah, tell me about it. So Chris, yourself, where you're at the moment, how are you guys avoiding the effects of the lack of talent on your project delivery?
Yeah, and first off, I'd like to echo Alex's point about the challenges of onboarding new people onto a project, whether it's permanent, and we'll talk about this a bit later, but whether it's a permanent or contract resource, especially on more complex projects, 6 to 8 months to me is absolutely not out of the question. It's pretty normal, and so there's a lot of challenges there. And so, one of the first things that I try to look at is to reduce the impact of someone leaving, right? And to do that, any project is going to have a significant amount of technical debt. So one of the very first things that I go after is, always have an ongoing background thread of efforts to reduce the technical debt that we have. Because when somebody leaves and this knowledge needs to be transitioned to somebody else, all that technical debt is going to weigh a lot on us. And the other thing is, in software engineering, I think it's super valuable to commit to the code review process, because code review process not only helps with code quality, but it's also a prime opportunity to have this kind of ongoing knowledge transition, right? So if somebody leaves, at least you've got a couple people on the team who are familiar with what they're doing. I'm also pretty big on a testing culture with automation tests and test-driven development. Because these kind of act as living, breathing documentation of your software, of your platform. And so again, when somebody leaves, a lot of that knowledge doesn't necessarily go away because everything still stays behind in the form of tests. And then it's all about documenting things, in wikis, try to document big moving parts in wikis and kind of keep our, artifacts of knowledge around. So by doing all this, at least you can reduce the impact of somebody leaving, and then put yourself in a better position. Now, beyond reducing the impact of somebody leaving, I also like to obviously try to retain people as much as we can and kind of prevent that. I think there's a lot of defeatism in our industry, saying, well, it's a great resignation, and people just kind of accept as a given fact that people are leaving because they can. I do think that people do leave managers, and they leave us for very specific reasons, and we need to be mindful of this. Some of the things that I try to look at, obviously, is to keep those weekly one-on-ones going, and really show people, and it's none of this is new, right? I mean, these are just kind of fundamental management principles, but show people that we care about their well-being, ask them how they're doing, especially these days with the pandemic and everything. Show people that we care about their career. Can we find opportunities to what is their appetite for that next step in their career, to senior position, to staff position, or to getting into management? Are they interested in all those things? And can we brainstorm a path for them toward these opportunities? And also in those one-on-ones, it's a great opportunity to recognize on an ongoing basis their accomplishments. So I know that's some of the things I have rattling in my head when I think about the impact of people leaving. So
I think that's a really important point, is that we're talking about bringing people into businesses and growing teams and adding to the headcount. But if you're leaking the other end and there's no retention, then that's gonna cause you just as many problems as not being able to bring the people in originally. So that's a really, really good point, Chris. Thanks for that. Rich, what you guys, what approach are you taking to cancel the effects of
Yeah, I think oh, hold on.
Yeah,
I believe I'm unmuted. Look, I'll be echoing some of the things that are already said here. I think from a bit of a different perspective, as I said in the opening, we are not a software company. We're multiple companies in these legacy industries, but we do see software capability, digital transformation as core to our success, right? So we face a lot of these challenges. I would say, our strategy from the go is to have a hybrid in terms of in-house and contractor base. We really believe that owning your product roadmap, owning your product management, owning your architecture is important. But I think that, once you have those directions set and those guardrails set on architecture, we do leverage third parties to flex on our development capabilities and delivery capabilities throughout the whole stack, dev, QA, DevOps, DevSecOps. We have several partners. And the one thing that I would say is, there was once upon a time when you outsourced to a partner, you were also outsourcing. It was their problem to attract. It was certainly their problem to retain. I think in today's world, you cannot assume that. I think that the war for talent is so important that when you partner with certainly a long-term partnership with a third party, you have to do the same three things that you would do with your own team. And you have to make your mission clear, your mission as a purpose as a company or for a particular project, why it's important. If it's not interesting, top talent will not come to you or they will not stay with you. You have to recognize your top performers. Again, whether they're badged employees or whether they're through a partner, recognizing them, recognizing the comp structure that's happening today and other means, making sure that people get rewarded for their hard work, and then being flexible, focusing on project delivery and results and allowing the team and the members to figure out the best way maybe to deliver that. Being flexible in location of resource is super important. They're here in Austin, we have the luxury of a great talent base, but there's awesome talent out there in other places that you can tap into for sure. And so I think those things are important if you're building an in-house team, but I think they're equally important. And I know we are actively engaging with our partners to attract and retain the talent they bring to the table as well.
Thank you very much, Rich. That's a really great point. It's not just, as you say, passing the buck and then saying it's someone else's problem. Is if it's a project for you guys, then it's at the core of it is something that you need to focus on. And yeah, that's a really great approach that you've got there, William. How are you guys at Vertalo dealing with the ensuring project delivery whilst growing?
Well, it's an interesting question because at any point in time you have a capacity and you're trying to work within that, set expectations within that, and also enhance that. So to my mind, a culture of continuous improvement is a really essential ingredient. Can your team get better and do better tomorrow than it did yesterday? If you can simply accomplish that, you can do a lot of other things. And we try very hard to foster that culture because at any point in time, we are somewhat limited in capacity. And frankly, we're an ambitious group, and ambition scales much faster than capacity. So no matter how many people you hire, you're always going to be up against that capacity limit if you're in the right business, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is that Austin right now is something of a big box tech town. Amazon's here, Google's here, Oracle's here, Apple's here, Dell's here, Facebook's here. And we're not hiring the people that they're hiring. We are hiring people who want in on an earlier stage, want to have a much bigger influence over their environment, want to build something that's much bigger than themselves that's not there already. And so it's an interesting thing because we run into a lot of candidates who are interested in those companies, and nothing wrong with that, but that's not our niche in hiring. So we're trying to focus on people who are really into what we're doing and who want to join at this stage where they can have such a profound influence on our product. The final thing is that Austin is a great destination now for a lot of people. And we've had a great deal of luck hiring among what I would call the Austin curious from elsewhere and relocating them here. I would say half of our hires over the last year were Austin curious folks who either just moved here in time to work for us or we relocated them here. So those are the things that I think are probably biggest on the landscape for us right now.
I think that's one of the points that you made there is, and that's probably true for all businesses, whether it's looking for talent or the target the people that you're looking to target as a company, focus on the right type of people. There's no point in spreading the net far and wide or trying to compete with businesses like your Googles, Apples, or people that want to work for those types of companies. If you're a smaller business, you're never ever going to obtain the right attract the right type of people. So looking at the values or the type of person that you want, and then sort of zoning on that can really, be a benefit. And then I suppose, obviously, you also find for you guys, as you mentioned at the beginning, you're all on site, right? So getting the type of people that want to work on site would maybe then give you an advantage over a remote first company, in the same way that people who want to work remote, it might give, vice versa. So no, there's some really good points there, William. So thanks for bringing those up. Rich, you touched on this earlier, but you guys run a very much a blended model between sort of contracts and permanent staff. Have you seen that as being able to, rapidly deploy teams or pop up teams from partners? That's probably enabled project delivery slightly. It had a positive effect on project delivery for you guys.
Yeah, and look, and there's always trade-offs. Any decision you make, there's pros and cons. I would say one of the pros of our strategy of having a core that is part of our companies, and then having this flex capacity with partners is a partner again that has 10,000, 12,000 developers maybe on staff. Whereas I talked about our 20,000 employees. Believe me, that's not the developer count, right? So again, we're in legacy industries. In terms of software development shops, our partners are much bigger than us. They have the ability to flex that dial, right? So with a 2 months notice, with 3 months notice, certainly you can really increase and bring in experienced resources to work on a project. I would say that that lead time is getting longer for all the partners as well. I don't think anybody's immune to this situation, whether it's niche, kind of folks that we're working with, boutique firms, or some of these larger firms that we work with. I would say, it does take longer to flex, but again, they really have the ability to bring skills, and sometimes skills that we need on a temporary basis. Maybe we need a certain skill for 6 months or 9 months, or maybe we need partial skill, whether it's in UX design or a particular architecture, that it's not something we need long-term, but we want to have world-class talent for a period. We found that's part of the pros of our strategy of moving that direction. But anytime, obviously, that it's something that's persistent for us, we want to think about bringing that in-house so that we can maintain that IP.
Yeah, I think that's really important, having that base there internally, where you say to keep the IP and then scaling up as and when needed for the more hands-on tasks is an approach that we've seen a lot of businesses take. Alex, obviously you guys are slightly different, as you mentioned, not looking to outsource or offshore or contract workers. It's building that permanent base. So, and that's worked for you guys. So yeah, explain a bit more about that.
I think I do think actually one of the things that William touched on, I think it's important, is we do greenfield projects here. We're a startup, and the people that you attract are people who want to work on complex problems, in a smaller team, which is a more dynamic team and where you have impact. And so I do think that's a good point, that, a guy who's probably worked at Amazon for 10 years of his life, he might think that they want to work at a startup. And we've found that sometimes those types of guys find it difficult to transition from a very structured sort of role where there's a big timetable and things like that to something which is a quicker goals and much more of a greenfield high impact thing. And they find that actually that's not what they're really after. So I do think it's important that you understand the people you're targeting that. But for us, I mean, we work in the security space. And not only that, I was talking to an outsourcing group a couple of weeks ago, and they had this slide, and they're quite embarrassed by it because the countries that they were bringing in engineers from were Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, places where, as a security group who makes security products, we really aren't interested in that type of, outsourcing. And that's something that you have to think about, from our perspective, for sure, from the government side of things. But the other side of things as well is, as I said, we make a product, and most people who make software don't actually make products. They actually make tools to enable selling of products. So what that really means for us is the code quality that we require is usually at a standard that's usually above most companies' requirements. These aren't internal facing tools. These are tools that people are paying us money every month, significant amounts of money every month, especially to understand their security, their security risks and their security postures. And those tools have to be to a standard where someone can use the site and think, yes, I want to use that. And bugs detract from that. And so we found it hard to really find high caliber sort of like outsourcing. I think there are specialist outsourcing groups that definitely reach a caliber and are great. But from a general purpose point of view, I've not found consultants or outsourcing groups that really reach that caliber. And then the other side of things is, we don't view engineering as commodity. It's not a commodity-based product, right? If I'm bringing someone on, there's a path there. I expect someone, I want to make sure that person stays on at the company, for many years. In fact, I have many engineers who've worked for me for 3 companies now, right? For the last 15 years, because we view this as a long-term relationship. This isn't a one-night stand. This is not something that's interchangeable. These are people that you want to bring on. And one of the commodity-based, transactional-based model, that code has to stand up until the contract's over. That code might, or a contractor walks away from that at the end of the contract. We have that code for the next 5-6 years at least, right? That code has to be part of our living, breathing, part of our product. And so that's, we want someone who takes a long-term view of this stuff, who understands that they're building something for the future. And I think Chris touched on test-driven development, having your testing pyramid, having UAT tests, all this sort of stuff. All this, it builds that idea that you need someone who understands that full stack, who wants to build that, who's interested in that. And we've struggled getting the sort of outsourcing groups who can do that. But as I said, I'm not just saying it's being negative. I'm just saying that from our point of view, for what we sell, to whom we sell, and the quality that we need, that's and also the fact that, the current situation in Eastern Europe, where a lot of outsourcing groups isn't. I saw a picture recently, and I hope it's a fake one, of a bunch of guys in a basement working on laptops because they're working for an outsourcing group, and they're in Ukraine and getting bombed. That's sort of a dystopian picture which doesn't play well for what we're trying to do, right? So we take that view, and while we'll bring on consultants for what I call periphery things, stuff that integrates with our stack but isn't core to our stack, we've struggled with that consultancy thing. But again, we are a niche in cybersecurity and selling a product, so that might not be the case for other people who view their products more of on the periphery.
Yeah, I think it's all valid points. And as we touched on earlier, different businesses have different needs, and what works for one will not work for another. Chris, you've obviously got, as we touched on, experience in sort of looking at different teams, and we've spoke before about potentially contracts and offshore partners and whatever else it may be. What's your opinion on the sort of the blended model?
Yeah. So once again, I do have to echo a lot of Alex's points. I do agree that, and while I do a good amount of things with cybersecurity, I do operate in a less niche market, which is basically building web applications, right? Which is pretty standard in our industry. And I do feel the exact same challenges that Alex just brought up, which is looking at things from a transactional model where you can just bring in resources and then get rid of them. There is a lot of value into sort of a long-term investment with an engineering team who will nurture your code base. Now, I will say I think regardless of whether you go permanent, badged employee, or you go with contract, I think finding good talent fit is always going to be a challenge. I've had a lot of challenges myself, just hiring people in the city I live in. I had a lot of challenges working with contracting firms as well. What my point of frustration is that I would like contracting firms to really own the development of their contracting resources, but they don't. Okay, I have worked with a lot of them. I have yet to come across a single one who actually does something meaningful to actually level up the folks they place with people, and they don't. So I think that's the biggest opportunity out there for contracting resources to do that. Now, in light of this challenge, I have worked and I still work with contracting firms, but I end up doing their job for them, right? So I interview the candidates, I make the accurate assessment of their skills, and I end up coaching and training them because even though they're contract resources, I want to make sure that I turn this into as much of a long-term investment and ongoing partnership with them. And I try to grow the people, even as contractors, and make sure that they're really part of the team. They're part of the core investment that we made as a team. And when we can pull this off, it actually works out pretty well. But it does, it does take a lot of investment. And in the end, I think the biggest thing is I don't think there is any kind of shortcut out there to investing in people. Whether you go with contractors, whether you go with badge employees, you have to invest in people. They have to really care about what they're doing, and it's our job as leaders to make that happen. So
yeah, I couldn't agree more. Investing in people, the development of those people within your team, whether you say the badge employees, contract staff, whoever's coming under, and Rich, you touched on this earlier as well, whoever's coming in under your umbrella, it's all about making sure that you can give the right rewards, the right training, the right growth. There's obviously a slight difference if it's like an outcome-based project, and you're saying, here, go to a firm, take this thing and bring it back to me finished. But if you're looking to supplement a team that you have already with outsourced or contract members of contractors, even if it's 1 to 10 from an outsourced firm, then it's important to still make them feel as part of that, because and then that's how you're going to get the best out of anyone, whether it's a techie or someone who works in the staffing sector, or a footballer, or someone, anyone who plays part of a team sport. Bringing them in and making them feel part of a tribe or a unit is only going to benefit the people and the business. So that's great. William, I know you guys obviously growing. You're looking at mainly in the Austin area, or people Austin curious. Have you found, or have you looked at sort of a contracting option?
We have, but there are a number of issues with that, and I want to pick up on something that Chris ended on, because I think with contract work, there are a couple different circumstances. There's the more transactional variety, where you're outsourcing something that's got a closed scope and is well defined, and that's very transactional. You're making a build buy decision. Then there is the staff aug variety of contracting, where you're really trying to up your resources. In the second case, they're coming into your organization, and like most organizations, we're looking for people whose upside potential in our setting is very high. And we don't do things exactly the way anybody else does, nor does anyone else here. And that means that it will fall to us always to train those people up. The staffing organization cannot possibly do it, because they're not enough on the inside with us. And I think that that's the facts just align with those incentives. And so if you take that staff aug, you are also taking on the job of training them up as employees. There's obviously some risk there, because there's turnover, because they're not all in on the project. And that gives me somewhat of a bias toward a straight hire. I would much rather do that than staff aug. The other thing that I think enters here is that this is what Alex said. Developers are not a fungible resource. developers are entirely different from one to the other. And you usually need a whole spectrum of them. And then there are key roles within that, some for leadership, some for specific specialized knowledge. We are more generalist oriented than a lot of places are. That's just the nature of the business. When you make a decision on these people, you're actually not able to say they're going to walk in the door and transform us, right? You're making a judgment that says over the next year or two, we can bring this person up to the point where they can transform us. And that's the kind of judgment that we're making. And so that once again cuts a little bit against the contracting role. The final thing that I would say is this: most of the great programmers that I've ever known don't bother with contracts because they don't have to. And so I'm a little leery of the proposition from that perspective as well. If we can buy rather than build, if we can solve a problem by throwing money at it, then by all means we will do that. That's almost always the right decision in a business. The difficulty is whether you can actually solve the problem by throwing that money at it. And contracting is a very expensive way to learn those lessons.
Yeah, well, I saw some stats on this actually, and in some cases, actually having an hourly contractor is actually cheaper than hiring perm. But we can talk about that another time. But yeah, in some cases, not all, but there are times.
I do think you have to think about the fact that people on this call work in tech, right? They're not a hospital looking to hire a guy to help make an internal sort of like healthcare app, right? These are I think everyone here on this call pretty much works on something that gets sold. And that's a very different viewpoint from the vast majority of programmers that you need, right? That spec is very different. And contractors, tend to go more for the other side of things because it's good money and it's low pressure and it's a great work lifestyle balance. That's probably not the type of people who would necessarily be attracted to a startup or to a big greenfield project, generally as a rule. Like they tend to be more interested in working for bigger companies that, looking for internal tools to be helped developed or maintained and things like that. And so I think it is a very different audience to possibly the four gentlemen on the call. Yeah.
Well, I think,
I think that's a.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rich, you're probably going to. I'll let you go ahead. You're probably going to
I
say
was
smarter.
going to say I agree that it's an important point of triage, right? That I think it's different use cases. You need to understand who you are and what you're trying to do. I would add that what Alex and Chris said around one thing to think about when you are dealing with a third party is, as we think about our risk profiles, one of the climbing risks is actually third party risk from a cybersecurity standpoint, right? So just know that when you do engage with a third party, even if they're in your repository using your tools, whatever, it does come with a heavier lift of making sure that you're working with a group that meets your security standards. So, I think while you can turn the dial, like I said, there's pros and cons to everything. That's certainly something we have to, because of our strategy, we invest more in making sure that our partners have a security program that matches our own. And so if you don't contract, I think you're alleviated from that kind of lift. But I would say, devil's advocate to the best developers only want to work on a product. I think if they want to be part of a startup and they want to build a product, I think you're certainly right. But I have run into my fair share, and they're usually in boutique firms where they're actually very energized and they have attention deficit syndrome along with their amazing capabilities. And they love the idea of zooming in and working for a solar energy company for 9 months to a year. And then they pop over and they're working on maybe a 5G project. And so there are great resources that just want to have variety in their life. If you are in that latter group where you're maybe building a tool and you're not trying to build something that is core to your company. It's an enabler of your company. I think there are good developers to be had. And the last thing I'll say is, and I think Chris and Alex both touched on this, or Chris and William, I think it's unavoidable that you have to be responsible to some degree if you go the route of a third party of owning their work and bringing them up to speed. I mean, look, I'm sure everybody here will tell you they're an agile shop and we're highly collaborative. And if you're truly operating that manner, it's impossible to have this division of, okay, we're a collaborative group, we're teaming, yet, you need to go learn your skills and be professionally developed from your company while we take care of our own. You just have to take care of the team and provide, the same level of support and think about and give them opportunities in the same way. If you want to be successful, you certainly don't have to, but I think the successful way is you have to assume that responsibility if you go that route.
I think the two interesting points. I think the first one's definitely true. I think, but there are boutique consultancy companies out there who are extremely good. Like if we're going to do something in cryptography, I'm not going to bake that in-house, right? Because that would be insane, right? There are boutique companies out there who specialize in things, who bring in a knowledge that realistically you probably want to engage in them, and they'll have a level that you're not going to find very difficult to attain in-house. I think the second point is, and I've had the same problem I think that Chris has had. I think if you're going to invest that much in someone which you cannot hire, who's someone who next week might not be on your project and someone else might be switched, at that point you're like, well, I'm doing all the work here and I'm getting none of the upside, right? Because and I think that's the team augmentation thing. I think that's the gotcha on it, which is like, if I'm gonna treat you as one of my own, which I think is a decent human being, you should, right? Yeah. Right. Then at that point, you're like, well, I'd rather you be part of the team, right? And really be part of the team and not be kicking it to a middleman who might decide, I'm going to move you to this project. I'm going to bring in, and now you're nicely trained with all the nice new stuff and tech, right? I'm going to switch someone out there, and I think that's the thing that falls down with the augmentation side of things, like that you're going to miss.
As a counterpoint, I would say that I've had pretty good experiences upon investing in contract, people to invest in them. I've had good experiences in retaining them and for them to continue to bring business value for 2.5, 3 years, and that's worked pretty well. What's interesting is like, you could lose a contracting resource tomorrow, right? But that's also the same thing with your with your perm employees, right? It's in a market like this. I see a lot of candidates whose resumes, they've hopped from one company to another, every year, and power to them, because that's what the market demands, and they've done really well for themselves. So, between being able to hang on to a perm person for a year or hiring a contractor for about the same time, the risk is there, definitely, but I wouldn't say there's that much of a disproportion in risks between contractor and perm employee.
I think it's talking more about augmentation rather than sort of like that. But I do think, we've been lucky. Like, we haven't had the turnover that we expected to have, that other people have had. I think one of those things, I think what you touched on originally, which was like, hey, I think you have to keep your salary competitive. I think even in the start, the idea of that you used to pay startup guys no money and give them loads and loads of stock, that's not true, right? That's just not where the market is. You have to pay competitively. The stock's a nice thing, but you have to be there. And I do think it's true that if you're keeping up with inflation and you're keeping the rises going and you're keeping these guys engaged, then usually when people start looking for another job, it's a work-life balance thing, or it's they don't enjoy the work. And usually when they don't enjoy the work, it's because they don't like their manager or they don't like something that's gone on. And I think that's something that you have to be particularly cognizant of, right? That's like, especially in a hybrid world, the culture of the company is very important, because something When before you could have a heated discussion and then go out for a beer, in the hybrid world, everyone gets off their Zoom and broods about it, right? And that's a thing that you have to be very aware of. And in fact, our company, there are people who I would like to work with who I wouldn't necessarily bring on because they are divisive. And in the hybrid world, that type of divisive nature can be poison to an engineering group, right? You can't have that in a hybrid world or even a remote world. And I think that's one of the things that you have to be much more cognizant post-COVID, that people want to be happy at work. And I don't think it's a terrible thing to say that you want to be happy at work, you want to be fulfilled at work, spend most of your time there. So like, we haven't had that trouble, luckily, and touch wood, probably tomorrow I'm going to find out 4 resignation letters in my inbox, but hopefully not. I think that's something you have to be cognizant of.
I think that's a really, really good point, Alex. And I think that's maybe, William, something that you guys obviously haven't faced with. Like we're talking about sort of the relationships, how people's relationships develop with a hybrid model. One of the things that I think is really good with Vertalo and the way you go about hiring is that it's very clear. We're on site. So there's no there's no black and white with it. Oh, you can work from home some days, or there's this, and so it's everyone, all the team is together all the time. Now that obviously restricts you in some ways because Alex might be able to hire from across the whole of the US, or so may Rich, or so may Chris, because they're more remote or hybrid. You've got a smaller pool, but when people join, you're less likely to have people leave because they knew the gig straight away, unless obviously they fall out with someone on one of these heated discussions and they have a drink down the pub and then fall out even more. You know what I mean? It gives them, there's a clear, this is how we work. So when people come into the team, they know where they stand straight away. Have you seen that? Obviously, and we touched on it right at the beginning of the conversation with Chris, is making sure that you have less droppers or people falling out from their roles. You've probably the staff retention at Vertalo is great because of this model. I would have thought.
Yeah, it is great, and we are in Alex's preferred world there, where we can go at it hammer and tongs, and then go kiss and make up later at the pub, and it works out well. We surface all of the ideas in the tough discussions. We sort everything out later. And working in the office, it just gives you some things that are very difficult to reproduce over the wire. The energy in the room is fantastic. And the communication is so free and so without barrier. The number of casual, important conversations that takes place around here every day is very high, and we really thrive on that. And what we've found is that since we moved into this particular office space in March of 2020, we were back in the office together by June, and we've worked here ever since, just applied some common sense, and everything's been fine. And it's kind of a secret weapon for us. Back then, people were still pretty skittish about coming to the office. That's changing. I talk to a lot of people who are very eager for that sort of human contact and human touch in the workplace again. And we're very happy because we're ahead of that curve, and the vibe here is fantastic. And if you're a developer and you like fried chicken, then we'll have you in on Fridays for lunch and talk about what we're doing. So
I'll see you next week.
It's terrific. Yes, exactly.
No, as I say, what's really good, and well, I'm really, really glad we got this panel together, is everyone's got slightly different views on how things can, there's no right or wrong way of doing things. There's a right way for you, I suppose, for your business, and everyone's got their own views. Aside from that, we mentioned the lack of talent, or trying to find the right talent. Aside from the effects on project delivery, what other effects are you guys seeing at the moment that this lack of talent is causing? Chris?
Sure. I mean, at least for us, and knock on wood, right? We've been in my teams, we've been able to not have any churn, but with this said, I have gone through churn of employees before, and I think it doesn't. You have to recognize that it will impact the morale of your team, right? When somebody leaves, the team was connected to them one way or another. There's a very human aspect to it, but there's also the fact that by somebody leaving, now there's more work that's being spread across the team, and there's like knowledge that has to be transitioned. And again, you have to acknowledge that to your team, and really understand, get them to understand that that everybody knows that this person has left. It's going to it's going to have a big impact, and we're going to work with stakeholders to adjust timelines accordingly, and we're going to try to hire somebody new, bring on somebody new, perm or contract, but we're also going to give you time and space to train this new person coming in, and to put them in a position to succeed as well. So I think, when somebody leaves, there is an impact, and I think it needs to be acknowledged, and you need to be proactive about it, because you don't want to get into a rapid downward spiral. If you don't acknowledge these things, if you don't put the necessary time and space, then other people are going to quit like this, and before you know it, it's a really bad situation. So
that one thing I was going to obviously, so that probably affects the point Chris just made there, William. That would maybe affect a business where everyone is on site working together. Someone leaving that team, it maybe has more of a knock-on effect than a team that are fully remote, because you say if someone's remote, they've left, you could just switch off and you don't see them again. Maybe, I don't know. But with that have you seen that affect you guys as well?
I would say that it does not have that knock-on effect, because when everyone's together, they know one another well. And when somebody struggles, they know it. And when somebody is not performing, they know it. And when somebody ends up on the bubble, they know it. And so I think, in a sense, it's much less abrupt when somebody leaves after having been in such a tight mix. So I don't think that problem is a particularly bigger one for us than for a hybrid or remote team.
Fair enough. I'll shut up next time. Alex, obviously, look, the lack of talent that's out there, or the presumed lack of talent out there, has effects on project delivery. What other effects have you seen it have?
Sometimes a more joking one is everyone's now a senior engineer. I've noticed, like you have 6 months out of college, you're now a senior engineer. But that's more of a joke. I think engineers have become more aware of their value, right? And it's a bit odd coming from the Valley, where engineers were aware of their value anyway, right? I mean, like superstar engineers knew how much they were worth. It doesn't necessarily feel that much different from that, right? I mean, Austin was coming that way anyway. But now you have guys, who are remote, who are in Iowa or Idaho, who are always told that, well, you're not really core to the team, like now they're like, well, no, hang on a minute, everything works on tech now, and I'm in demand. So I think that's the biggest change we see, that people understand their value. But as I said, if you were in the Valley, that was the case, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing, and I think guys now look at it as, I don't necessarily have to just impress you, you have to impress me, which has always been, every time I've told everyone at work, it's got to be a great fit, right? We've got to be a place that you can shine, and you got to be, and we've got to be a place, and that's a two-way street. The interviews aren't necessarily, yes, there's a tech interview and all the rest of it, but a lot of it's about, fit. And everyone's been saying it for years. And if you were outside of, the Valley, no one really believed it, right? Because you just wanted a job. But now that's not the case, right? Guys understand that's important. And when we talk to people, they ask those questions. They ask, what's the team like? What's your attitude? Those sorts of questions, because they can be being more picky. I think it's a better thing for us because I think it's somewhere we shine. You know, we've always taken that view. We've always pushed that view. We are a tech first company. The biggest budget in that company is engineering. You know, engineering is in the C-suite. Engineering drives a lot of decisions. And so it attracts that type of people. But I do think that that's on the whole a better thing for a lot of engineers, right? They understand their value and they understand that they need to think about the company they're going to from both sides of the coin. So I think that's the biggest change I've seen. And of course, you know, everyone's a senior engineer, but yeah.
It's very true. I speak to about 100 engineers a day, and yeah, I can vouch for that. Rich, in terms of what we're seeing in the comments that have made already, is there anything else or anything that you agree with or disagree with in that we're seeing?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, you know, the advantages that the guys lay out, I think I agree with all of them. I think there's just different mitigating strategies. You know, I just circling back a bit before I answer this question, look, you know, being all together is best. I think if you're not all together, then what you have to be aware of is you're going to need to be together at some point in time. And so proximity, even to those third parties, whether you're getting together as a group or going to them. So if you are in a hybrid situation in terms of in-source, outsource, make sure that you're spending time together. But to your question of like, what else am I seeing? I would say this, and this might be another thing as software native companies, it's probably intuitive to my colleagues here. But if you're coming from this enterprise IT approach, I'll call it, in a legacy industry, and you're trying to attract and maintain teams, I think that, and we've talked about this before, Patrick, I think there's this naturally, every time you try to recruit, no matter what you're recruiting for, no matter what the level, it's like this boilerplate 5 years experience, 10 years experience. And I've seen funny memes where people talk about their, you know, enterprise IT looks for somebody with 5 years experience on something that was invented 2 years ago. So there's just kind of this, you know, we want somebody who's been there and done it before. In this environment, you must identify high potential, smart people who want to do something new and train them. Or you can be waiting a very long time. You know, me competing against these software native guys, they're going to have a really attractive story. And so where I can be successful is, look, you want to be a DevOps guy, you want to be, you know, you want to learn this particular skill. We will invest in you and train you. That's another way to get talent and retain talent. It engenders loyalty. And makes them feel like, you know, you truly are in it together. So I would say, you know, don't be hesitant to take a chance on someone who doesn't have the skill you need today. Help them develop that skill.
I think that's really, I mean, we've never ever asked, we never state what languages we use because you hire problem solvers, right? And the idea that if you're going to hire someone who can't learn another imperative language, that's blows my mind. The idea that you have to have someone who's a C specialist, you know, you can't teach a guy who spent 4 years or someone who spent 4 years at college to switch a language. I mean, that type of thing, you know, if you hire smart people and give them problems to solve, then they'll figure out how to solve those problems. And language isn't a big problem to solve, or a piece of text not a big problem to solve. Also, the flip side of that as well is if you hire smart people, people go to interviews and they're like, hey, that's a really smart guy. I like to work with smart people. Smart people attract smart people. It's a virtuous cycle. But I think that's an important side of things as well. So yeah, I think that's really, really interesting that you have to think about the long term, not the 6 months it's going to take someone to switch from TypeScript to Rust.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
that's
Alex, we call that the Pied Piper effect, right? If you can land the Pied Piper, he comes with, or she comes with her following. That's one great way to quickly recruit.
Yeah, I will say I'd like to echo some of the points made by you know, Rich and Alex. One of the most beneficial things that we ever did for ourselves as you know, in the teams that I serve, was to really foster a culture of coaching and very, very carefully hire people who are earlier in their careers, but who wanted to learn, and coach them and train them up. And it has worked really, really well for us. And so I really want to, and another thing that I see is in our industry that is unfortunate is this polarization on years of experience when hiring people. I have interviewed a lot of senior engineers and above with 10, 15, 20 years of experience who've never advanced past advanced beginner level. Okay. But I have seen folks, I have been able to coach some folks, with a different learning path, different kind of guidance within 2 years operate at a level far beyond a lot of people who identify as senior software engineers. So I think there's a lot of room in our industry for different walks of life, for a different learning paths. And I think it is really incumbent upon us as leaders to really recognize people's potential and carve out growing paths for everybody.
Yeah, I think they're all really, really valid points. And as you say, getting the right, it's about having people in a team. If you're looking to grow a business or looking to push forward, it's about having people that are, smart, as you say. It's not necessarily about being able to tick a certain box in years of experience, but if you've got the right mindset and the right ability to problem solve, then someone who's only been out of college for 2 years may be, as Chris said, maybe more beneficial than having someone of 10 years experience who's just stuck in their ways. And being able, as the tech market does adjust and change so often, having people that have the agility or the ability to be able to change with it is more important now than ever. So and that having that mindset as well will open up the talent pool for you. So I think they're all really, really
I think, Patrick, there are a couple of things, everyone has said basically we're going to have to hire more junior. That implies more training, right? And I agree with all that. There's one other thing that I'm starting to see that I would call big box boredom. I think there are a bunch of people who have spent a lot of time in these big companies and they kind of reached their limit. And every once in a while, you talk to one who has just the right attitude for a different environment. That to me is very exciting because there's a lot of that in Austin. And I look forward to all those people becoming more available for the likes of us.
No, definitely. And especially within Austin where you are, William, you see the amount of big businesses that are moving there and have moved there. You say people become, they see these smaller businesses growing and, receiving investment, IPOing and whatever it is, and then wanting to be a part of that journey rather than being a cog in the wheel, being an actual person that has some say. That you're seeing a lot of people moving in from the bigger businesses into smaller businesses because of that mindset. So look, I really, really appreciate everyone's time. It's been lively. I've made loads of notes. So yeah, I've learned a lot. Which isn't surprising because I don't know too much, but no, it's been really, I'm really grateful for everyone that's joined. Alex, Rich, William, Chris, thanks so much for your input. Everyone that's signed on during the event and listened all the way through, it's been fantastic. Thank you very, very much. We have made a recording as well, so that'll be published very soon. Thank you very, very much for joining, and we'll see you, hopefully see you again soon on the next roundtable that we host. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.